Welcome to the House Higher Education Budget Committee meeting today. We have bill hearings in the queue on schedule for today. Doing a few housekeeping items before we start. I would like to think everybody's aware that there is a media present in the committee room. So just like to welcome Emma. Like to welcome Emma to the committee today. She's a freshman at University of Kansas, majoring in journalism and mass communications. So we're glad to have her here, not necessarily in her capacity as a student, but in her capacity as a someone that's working for a local media news station. Also today, I'd like to welcome to the committee Representative Susan Concanon, filling in for Representative Rajas. That being said, we have two bills that we will hear testimony on. Additionally, we do have meeting minutes that we need to approve. We can do that at the end as long as I don't forget, like last time. So with that being said, we'll start with HB 2464. There was a bill introduced during last session, and I apologize for not doing a bill hearing earlier in this session on that bill. But starting off, I'd like to invite Jill Walters, reviser, to do an overview of HB 2464.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. House Bill 2464 increases the dollar amount of state scholarships for students attending a post-secondary educational institution who have established financial need. Currently, the scholarship is limited to $1,000, and that hasn't been increased since 1985. And that's $1,000 annually, and that hasn't been increased since 1985. What this bill would do would increase the amount to the lesser amount of actual costs of attendance in any year, or 70% of the annual attendance cost if the state scholar is awarded a state scholarship under this program. And it says commencing after July 1 of 23, but that was really because the bill was introduced last year. And so, but I mean, it would still be that amount for any period program commencing after that. So it would still go into effect on July 24. So financial need is redefined to mean the difference between the student's available financial resources and the student's total anticipated annual attendance cost at an eligible institution. You can see on page 1 some of that stricken language. We used to take into account $450 each year from the student's own work. And so that might have been a good amount of money in 1985, but maybe not so much anymore. And then they also took into account a contribution from the income and assets of the student's parents, and that was stricken. We would not take that into account anymore. We would just look at their actual financial resources that is available to them. And I think on the fiscal note, you'll note it, and please note that this fiscal note was done in March of 23. But the fiscal note said that it would increase the maximum award of a scholarship to $6,050 per year. So there would be that much of an increase. The eligible institution is to clarify that it includes any public university, municipal university, community college, tech college, and not-for-profit independent. I think that language is really just updated because we were referring to the Higher Ed Act of 1965. So I think we're just amending that to reflect how we currently talk about. And then state educational institution and attendance cost are added in there for when you do the formula of how much a scholarship, the maximum amount of a scholarship could be. Then the bill becomes effective upon publication in the statute book, which this year is July 1st of this year, 2024. And I'd be pleased to stand for questions.
Thank you, Jill. Are there any questions for the reviser? Representative Smith.
Jill, did you say these kids needed to be state scholars or have a state scholarship award?
So they're for the purposes of the scholarship, they're called state scholars, and they would be required to be a full-time student, an in-state student, and that they've exhibited scholastic ability.
Now, would scholarships, would already have some before they get this on top of it? Does that make any sense?
So I think there could be. It could be a possibility, like a community foundation in there.
Well, I was thinking
Not that.
even state scholars got a nice scholarship. I'm not sure of that though, so, but
The regions might be better to answer that question, sir.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Smith. Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The fiscal note on this doesn't really seem real clear because it basically depends on whether they reduce the number of students that can receive the award or whether they receive an increase in allocation to fund the current number of students. And so if they went the latter route and it was an increased allocation to fund the current number of students who currently receive the scholarships, do we have any idea how much that would actually cost?
Joe?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Fairchild, I think the Kansas Board of Regents might be the better entity to answer that question.
Thank you, Representative. We'll circle back on that question here in a little bit. Any other further questions for the revisor? If not, thank you, Joel, for the overview. Next, I'd like to welcome to the committee Dr. Blake Flanders, President and CEO of the Kansas Board of Regents. Welcome to the committee. And I believe you are offering proponent testimony of H.
Yes, I am offering proponent testimony. Good afternoon, Chair Howe and members of the committee. I will be brief and try to answer your questions the best that I can. Essentially, I just see this legislation as modernizing the state scholarship program, a program that has had tremendous success. It increases the award from the former base award and to a maximum of $6,336 for FY 2025. The State Scholar Program is a little unique in that the students must follow a curriculum in high school and then perform academically. I believe there was a question about could they receive other scholarships. I think many times they will because they will be scholars who are academically inclined, and it's certainly a merit-based scholarship in that manner. So with that, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Flanders. I'll start off with, I had a few questions, and just to let the committee know, I did introduce this bill last session. I was kind of astounded that the award amount hadn't been updated since 1985 with increasing needs for financially for many students, and especially those that are perhaps working through a curriculum to achieve a certain degree of credential to qualify for a scholarship. So do you have any data, does Board of Regents have any data about how well known the Kansas Scholars curriculum is being, at least through the K through 12 level, being pushed and the awareness of this curriculum as a pathway for a scholarship? Do you have any information about that?
So I would tell you that the curriculum, I would say, is very well known among counselors and administrators and officials in the high school arena. Depending, but a student also has to follow that curriculum and complete that curriculum. And so really there needs to be a vision from that student, really from early on, that you're going to follow the pathway of the State Scholars curriculum and the way that was set up. And so by that very nature, the scholarship is not going to have as many numbers apply for it as maybe some other scholarships. You also have to perform academically as well.
Thank you for that. And under the current scholarship, how many, I'm sorry for not pulling that information out of your testimony if it's in there, but what percentage of students are you able to award that are eligible for the scholarship? Is there a certain amount? Are you able to award all those that are qualified under the scholarship?
So no, we wouldn't be able to award everyone, but I'll need to get you that information to show what the subscription rate on the scholarship is.
Okay, thank you. I believe Question from Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Doctor, for being here. I know schools that everybody gets a scholarship, so I know that they do get scholarships. We've had some students that get full rides because they have the presidential scholarship or something. Would they be eligible for this scholarship?
Yeah, so it depends. If they followed the Kansas Board of Regents Kansas Scholar curriculum, and then completed that curriculum and met the criteria, they would be eligible.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Flanders, Representative Fairchild?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering if you could answer the question that I asked previously, if you have any idea how much this would cost, if it funds the current number of students who receive the award.
I could get you that information pretty quick. I don't want to try to do the math in my head right now, but you're going to be increasing the award substantially, and so to keep the same numbers, we'll send that note over to the committee by the end of the day.
Thank you for that. If we were to say hypothetically that we were able to pass this out of committee and it got across the line in the House and the Senate, we got it enacted, is there a certain amount of money or dollars that are reappropriated or maybe not encumbered, which could be used to cover an additional award going into the next fiscal year 25, or would you have to logistically start maybe in fiscal year 26 to adjust?
Thank you, Chairman, for that question. It really depends on the budget that comes out of the current House, or actually is settled on at the end of the session, and what the governor signs. It would be dependent on any carry forward balances that could be used to help assist students. So if the position is to lapse all those carry forward accounts and take those from the budget, then they're not there to fund student scholarships.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Flanders? Representative Kincaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to wrap my arms around what this fiscal note's going to look like. Approximately how many receive this now?
So this last year we had in FY 2023, which was relatively modest year, we had 573 students receive the award.
Okay, and is there a cap on how many?
So the cap is typically by the amount of appropriation.
Okay.
So that's the cap. We don't cap it in terms of students. When you exhaust the appropriation, then you can't award any more students.
Okay. And I looked through here in the requirements, the academic requirements, they take the curriculum. Are there any other requirement? I mean, it sounds like as long as they are a good student. So who decides that? How does that define?
So the students, they must be a Kansas resident. They must go through the curriculum. It says the academic profile of the recent scholars include an average ACT of 29 and an average GPA of 3.92. So it is competitive, and they're excellent students.
Okay, is there a selection board? Sorry, I keep asking questions, sorry.
Yeah, so I would need to refer to my director of financial aid for that, but,
Okay.
but there's a selection process that's used.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. I guess I'll give you the last question unless others come up. How meaningful would it be to not only update this maximum award, but in terms of the overall, what is referred to as brain drain, that we lose students that go out of state for post-secondary higher ed opportunities? How important is it to update this scholarship merit-based program for students?
So we've seen, as you know, our college going rate has been dropping of students who are matriculating into college from high school. And so we've seen some students attending out of state. That's remained relatively flat, maybe a % higher over the last 6 or 7 years. You know, I think we would have to let the program run for 2 or 3 years and then see if we're making headway and retaining more students here. I think that there's a greater chance of retaining more students in Kansas. And here's what we know. If a student does go out of state, the chances of them living and working outside of Kansas increase. So if you attend a university out of state, life might happen in the state where you are, and you might settle there and continue to work. The same thing, we recruit twice as many students into Kansas to our state university system as exit for other opportunities. And that's one of our strategies here to increase talent development for Kansas business, is to retain more of those students who came from out of state and make sure they live and work in Kansas when they're finished with their degrees.
Go to Representative Vamix next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Flanders, question, and I think that's been the message been sent to us, to committee by all of the CEOs and presidents of the university over the last, 3 months that we've been here, 2 months, and that trying to attract, that individual from everywhere, so we have our numbers up everywhere. But just so that I understand this, if we were to do nothing on this bill, we still have the current program in place, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Seeing no further questions, Dr. Flanders, thank you for appearing as a proponent for HB 2464. Next, I'd like to welcome to the committee Matt Lindsay, President of the Kansas Independent College Association, providing proponent testimony.
Thought I pushed it. Let's try again. Matt Lindsay, Kansas Independent College Association. Thank you. I am appearing before you as a proponent. We support this scholarship and the intent here, especially if we were able to fund what is a long overdue improvement and modernization of this scholarship. My appearance before you is both as a supporter and also to note an amendment we'd like to see made in this, and that's because there's some outdated language in the in the bill. In section 1E on page 2, lines 5 through 7. There's some references to the nonprofit institutions as accredited by the Higher Learning Commission of the North Central Association of Colleges and Schools. There isn't anymore a Higher Learning Commission of the North Central Association of Colleges and Schools. It's just the Higher Learning Commission. They split, and there is no North Central Association anymore. They ceased operating in that way in 2014. There are some other statutory references that accomplish the same thing. A more consistent approach is one that I've listed in my testimony. So if you are interested in making that fix, we would be appreciative. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Matt. Are there questions for Mr. Lindsay? Seeing none, thank you for appearing as a proponent for HB 2464. Is there any neutral testimony? Is there anybody wanting to provide neutral testimony? If not, is there anybody wanting to provide opponent testimony to HB 2464? Seeing none, we will close the bill hearing on, Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make that motion. I think we should be as precise as we can be in statute. And if that's incorrect and it's not been in existence since 2014, if you would take a conceptual amendment and put that verbiage in, I would appreciate that. So I would so move my amendment.
Well,
okay.
So we're having a bill hearing right now. So in order for us to work the bill today, we would have to suspend the rules. We'd have to have 2/3 support by the committee So
Thank you.
that is something we could certainly do. And I guess I told people before the committee started or the bill hearing started, I'd like to take the temperature of the committee. Ideally, if there's any action we would want to pursue today, we would, of course, have to suspend the rules. And in order to not come back tomorrow, tomorrow's the last day that a non-exempt committee can meet. And so if that is something that you would like to do, we could certainly do that, perhaps after the next bill hearing. Because we might want to work both bills. And we could do that with one motion, I think. Okay? All right. So are there any other questions or comments about HB 2464? Seeing none, we'll close the bill hearing and start a bill hearing on HB 2843, establishing a scholarship task force to study scholarship programs and creating the Kansas Academic Excellence Scholarship Program to replace the Kansas Ethnic Minority Scholarship Program. Starting off, we'll have Joel Walters provide an overview of this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This bill establishes a task force. It's called a scholarship task force, and it will study scholarship programs in the state of Kansas. The 9-member task force is established there. It's the Senate and House Education Committee chairs and the minority members, or a House or Senate designee by them. So those 4 people would need to be a senator or a House of Representatives member. 1 member would represent state educational institutions, and that number 5 would be the Big 6 in the state of Kansas. 1 member would represent a technical college, 1 a community college, 1 representing independent colleges and universities, and then 1 member of the Board of Regents or an employee appointed by the Board of Regents. They would be appointed, these members would be appointed by July 1st. The chairperson of the House of Representatives Committee on Higher Education Budget would call the first meeting, and then the provisions of the bill talk about how they organize and then they get paid. And so just that boilerplate language that we generally see. And if I could, I'm sorry, I didn't mean if I did misspeak, the House people are from Higher Ed Budget Committee, not Education Committee. So I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. I'd like to backtrack on that one. So what the scholarship committee would do would study each scholarship and scholarship program that currently exists in the state. And it would be not limited to, but it would certainly include those scholarships available to Kansas residents who are first-generation college students. They'd make a recommendation with regard to such scholarships, and then they would present their report to the Committee on Ways and Means and House Appropriations on or before January 15th of next year. And then regarding the other provisions of the bill, Kansas currently has a Kansas Ethnic Minority Scholarship Program for financial assistance to students who are Kansas residents, have financial need, demonstrated academic ability, and identify as a member of any of the following racial or ethnic groups: African American, American Indian, Alaskan Native, Asian or Pacific Islander, or Hispanic. And so what this bill would do, it would change the name and eligibility requirements for the program. The program would be renamed the Kansas Academic Excellence Scholarship Program. And then to receive this, you would have to be a Kansas resident, have financial need, and demonstrate the academic ability that you would perform well at the universities or the educational institutions. The bill amends the definition of eligible institution. It was a old definition based on 1965 provisions in the federal law. And I might point out at this point that there is an error on my part in the bill in drafting. This should have included technical and community colleges, and I do apologize for that. It doesn't. And so as the committee would wish, we might want to add that, but I just wanted you to know that it was my error. I forgot to add those. So that they are included now. They're just that would probably just need to be a technical cleanup because it was not intended to be that way. And then just as a reminder, all the other provisions of the program remain the same. The award is subject to appropriations, may be in an amount not to exceed 75% of the average amount of total tuitions and fees for full-time in-state students. It could be up for 8 semesters and then 2 additional semesters. if your program would require a 5th year of study, and then it can be renewed, excuse me, if you're remaining good standing and are making satisfactory progress toward the completion of your degree. And then the scholarship programs requires the Board of Regents to adopt rules and regs, and this would take effect upon Kansas Register. So as soon as we all know, sometimes that's the provision that we have in bills that we can get the law adopted more quickly than July 1st. And I'd be pleased to stand for questions.
Thank you, Jill. Go to Vice Chair Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jill, for your testimony. So do we need to offer a technical amendment to get this the way it should be?
If that would be the committee's, or Mr. Chairman and Representative Sanders, if that is the committee's desire, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the reviser? Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was told by someone that the fiscal note on this, that money was already appropriated by the Appropriations Committee. Is that correct?
I think so, but I would look to Brianna to be sure and check like where it is on the House and Senate side. So maybe we can look that up for you and get back to you on that, sir.
It was adopted in the House budget, I think per the governor's budget recommendation. So it is interesting because we've already at least made our recommendation, taken a position as a House on that. But because of circumstances, we're trying to evaluate whether or not we need to amend this ethnic minority scholarship program to ensure we're in compliance because of a U.S. Supreme Court ruling. So we're trying to figure out how to best respond to that and not jeopardize students that may be expecting an award or a renewal as they pursue their academics. So, any other questions for Jill? If not, thank you. Representative Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You said that we're expecting a renewal. Now, if they're getting a scholarship, they'll continue to get it. Will they not?
We can get to that maybe with the Board of Regents come back up to explain a little bit more in depth about that.
Thank you.
Yep. There's no further questions for Jill. Jill, thank you for the overview of HB 2843. We'll get into proponent testimony. I'd like to welcome back, I believe. Oh, neutral. Okay. Okay. Are there any proponents to HB 2843? Seeing none, we'll move to neutral testimony. With that, I'd like to welcome back to the podium Dr. Blake Flanders, President and CEO of the Kansas Board of Regents.
Thank you again, Chair Howe and members of the committee. And the reason we're neutral is on this testimony is that the legislation would create a 9-member task force to study each scholarship and scholarship program that currently exists in the state. As we look at that, we don't believe, we assume the bill is not intended to generate a review of scholarships offered by institutions of higher education, their foundations, or by charitable foundations, nonprofits, businesses, or individuals. So the scope of reviewing every scholarship available to Kansas residents who are first-generation college students would be very, very broad. And so that we would ask the committee just to consider that task before passing that part of this legislation. I would just say in terms of background, this was enacted in 1989 and provides scholarships for Kansas students who have financial need, demonstrated educational ability, and are members of statutorily identified ethnic minority groups, as the reviser has said. The board the Board of Regents has just notified the legislature that although the United States Supreme Court decision and students for fair admission applies to admission, that the same principles we expect are going to come into the realm of scholarships. And so at this point, there has not been a test case for this, but we felt like we should notify the legislature that this issue is a national issue and is likely going to impact some of these awards. We also had in our testimony about the correction with the community and technical colleges, and so you have caught that as well. With that, I would just stand for any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Flanders. I can speak to the task force question. I guess it wasn't my intent to review necessarily all scholarships. I guess what I was trying to narrow in on was with the enacted state scholarships, by the legislature. So that's what I was trying to get at. And if we need to tighten up that language, I would be willing to do that. So questions for Dr. Flanders? Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Blake, for being here. Can you tell us how the board would ensure, if we were to pass this bill, how we can ensure that we're still going to be supporting the same types of students? I think for the public, they're probably concerned about seeing us potentially getting rid of a scholarship focused on students of color or underrepresented backgrounds, how we can make sure that we're still continuing to support those students going forward.
So typically there might be a number of strategies that are taken to really help first generation students and students that perhaps higher education hasn't served as well as we need to serve. And so you might consider, you can be open to considering a number of different proxies to be sure that we serve Kansans with financial need. One of those might be you're a first generation student and your parents didn't graduate from college. A second could be that you are qualified for a Pell Grant and your family didn't have the income levels to support your full tuition and fees, or even a great portion of those tuition and fees. So there'd be a number of ways. We certainly would work with this body to say, how could we continue that to best serve those students?
Thank you. If we could, I don't want to create more work for your team, but if we could look at potentially some demographic information about the students that are Pell eligible or first gen, I think that'd be really helpful for our floor debate.
We can pull that together and get that to you very soon.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. I did have a question. Has there, since the U.S. Supreme Court ruling, has there been any complaints or any communications you've received from the U.S. Department of Education that maybe from the Office of Civil Rights or anything like that, that would indicate there's been any complaints filed against this particular scholarship program?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Howe, for that question. We have been contacted by the U.S. Department of Education, so there has been a complaint filed. That's certainly not a case in court, but we have been contacted.
So in terms of the complaint, how much information do they give you? I mean, do they give you many details of the complaint or the nature of the complaint or who filed the complaint? So how much knowledge are you given when you receive a notice like that?
Very few details, just that a complaint's been filed.
Okay. Do they require you to issue a response within so many days, or is there something you have to provide them?
Yeah, so then our attorneys would provide them a response. The response really is we are administering. This is not a scholarship that was created by the Kansas Board of Regents. This was a scholarship that we are following the state law to administer this scholarship, and this is really the state of Kansas scholarship that was created, and it was advocated for by the board, but created by the legislature, signed by the governor, and enacted in state law.
So there hasn't been any determination from a legal standpoint or any ruling from the U.S. Department of Education at this point?
There has not. The board just felt like that it appears that this is something that's certainly going to need to be addressed, and so that's why we just wanted to alert the legislature now while you were still in session.
Thank you for that. And as I understand, is this follow the same format as the state scholarship program in terms of the state scholars curriculum for this?
It would not.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Flanders? Seeing none, Dr. Flanders, thank you for your neutral testimony on HB 2843 today. Next, I'd like to welcome to the podium Matt Lindsay, President of the Kansas Independent College Association, providing neutral testimony on HB 2843. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for welcoming me back. Matt Lindsay, Kansas Independent College Association. So we are, of course, supportive of increasing college affordability efforts by the state. So we support the motive behind trying to improve the ways we do that. We appear as neutral here primarily because of some of the concerns you've already heard from Dr. Flanders. First, the ethnic minority scholarship as is, as you heard, we may be premature and needing to update it. And I'll even provide more detail. The Students for Fair admissions case or cases, the Supreme Court, of course, dealt directly with admissions. You cannot use race or national origin in admissions. However, in the majority opinion, there's a strong reference to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, and that deals with opportunities to access educational programs or activities, and those cannot be denied based on or determined based on race or national origin. So the ruling itself did not speak to things like financial aid, but pretty much everyone in the higher ed community expects at some point a case will be brought forward, and based on the Students for Fair admissions precedent, financial aid that is based on awarding based on race or national origin will not be allowed. That leads us to one, we're maybe moving very quickly with this bill and we're not sure what we should do with it. The second is more important. If we are going to replace the ethnic minority scholarship, we very much think we need to keep it targeted on communities of students who have need. If we can't use race and national origin, there are plenty of other non-race and national origin mechanisms by which we might use as proxies to reach those students to help them afford to go to college. It might be first generation students. Those are a little hard to define because it's not really defined in law, and we'd have to ask those questions to find out if their parents graduated from college, but that is a good audience to target. You could look at Title I schools and whether those graduates came from those schools. That would be, we believe, admissible. There are lots of ways to get this, but to go with an academic merit-based scholarship, an academic excellence scholarship that is not particularly well defined here seems to be targeting a different population than is served by the existing scholarship that we would want to maintain college affordability efforts. So that's why we're neutral. We think it's going to be necessary. We appreciate the legislature looking into this. We think we may need a little bit of more work on this bill to get there.
Thank you, Matt. Are you ready to stand for questions?
I am ready for questions.
Okay, very good. Start off with Vice Chair Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony, Matt. So would you like for me to offer an amendment to make sure that you're taken care of relative to what the reviser had to say first, or could we just allow her to take care of it and put it the way that it should be?
I apologize, Mr. Chair. I'm not quite sure what I believe the reviser was speaking to the community and technical colleges, which is different from who I'm here representing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Matt? If not, Matt, thank you for the testimony on HB 2843. Is there any other neutral testimony? Anybody else wanting to provide neutral testimony? Is there anybody wanting to provide opponent testimony on HB 2843? Seeing none, I just wanted to have a little conversation here before we close the bill hearing. I will note the Kansas Ethnic Minority Scholarship Program. To be eligible for the scholarship program, you must meet at least one of the following criteria, and there's 6 criteria. Have an ACT score of at least 26 or an SAT of at least 1060 to 1090, or a cumulative GPA of 3.0 or higher, a high school rank in the upper 33%, or completion of the Kansas Scholars Curriculum, or selection by National Merit Corporation in any category, or a selection by a college board as a Hispanic scholar. So those are the different criteria. There's a little bit of flexibility in there. It's not as tight, perhaps, as the state scholarship program. That being said, I did have some ideas after this bill was drafted in terms of how you could shape it. And Representative Woodard mentioned first generation. And I met some great first generation students yesterday in the Capitol. And I think many of you hopefully joined them for lunch. And they stopped by my office and probably your offices as well. And just hearing their firsthand testimony about how meaningful it is to receive a scholarship of some sort, to be able to afford the opportunity to pursue their academic field of study. So I do have a idea about changing the name. If we were to work this bill, changing the name of it to a first generation scholarship program. So getting rid of the academic excellence and specifically targeting first generation college students. Now they handed out for their advocacy day, a definition of what a first generation student would be. And it says a first generation student means an individual whose parent or guardian did not complete a bachelor, a BS, a Bachelor of Science degree, or a Bachelor of Arts or Fine Arts, or in the case of an individual who resided with and received support from only one parent, an individual whose parent or guardian did not complete a bachelor, I can't even say that. You know what I mean? I can't say that right now. So baccalaureate degree, sorry, tongue twister today. So they have a definition of what they think a first generation student would be. So I did ask Jill to just provide, at least on paper, conceptually what I was thinking about doing. But again, I want to take the temperature of this committee. Do you feel it's urgent that we need to move and change this scholarship program, or are you fine waiting until next session to address it? And I did add the task force language onto this bill. The Senate bill didn't have any such language, but I thought, well, at least it shows that we want to examine what we do offer, for state scholarships that the legislature has enacted to make it more meaningful, because a lot of them are merit-based scholarships. And if students are putting in time and effort in their high school years to have 4 years of math and 3 years of social sciences and history and 2 years of world languages and all these things, I think we need to make it count. I don't think $1,000, is for a whole year is sufficient. And it's 2024, and a lot has changed since 1985. So just kind of open it up for discussion. What you guys see as maybe a path forward, and really want to see what the will of this committee is on this. Vice Chair Sanders.
Mr. Chairman, do you have an amount in mind?
An amount of the scholarship?
Would this be more, how much, 1,001 or 5,000 or?
I don't. I think we'd probably need some additional information. Of course, on the previous bill that we talked about, there is kind of an amount, and that formulation has changed, but I don't believe this legislation 2843 really changes the amount. I'll check with the revisor to make sure. Okay, it does not. I think what I was concerned about is, if there is, I don't want to jeopardize students who are currently receiving this award. I think there's over 400 students in the state that receive it, and I'd hate to pull the rug out from underneath them and to leave them hanging and wondering, am I going to be able to afford next semester? If you qualify on the front end for the scholarship, you're in good standing, you can get renewed on that scholarship amount for the next academic year. So I just want to make sure we're doing our due diligence and doing right by our scholars out there. Representative Fairchild, then we'll go to Representative Woodard, then back to Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, with the TV or with the cameras here and everything, you know, it makes it seem like the media thinks that this bill is a little bit controversial, maybe because of the replacing the Kansas Ethnic Minority Scholarship Program part of it. And so, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but I'm guessing that Democrats might be in opposition to this bill on the floor. And then there's probably 4 or 5 of us conservative Republicans who never vote in favor of creating a new task force because we view that as being an expansion of government and not being spending that's completely necessary, because we think that that's something that can be studied during the regular session rather than being studied outside of session and have to have these additional costs to pay the members of the task force. And so, I mean, if my thinking is correct and if the Democrats are going to be in opposition to this and there's 4 or 5 of us conservative Republicans that would vote against it because of the task force part of it, then we wouldn't have a veto-proof majority. And so, I mean, I would prefer to just take the task force part out of the bill.
Appreciate your comment on that. Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I walked in here supportive of this bill, and then the testimony made me even more confused, and I don't know what I want to do. You know, I think if we were to work this, I think, appreciate the representative comments. I probably would suggest that we do move forward with the task force to see if this is truly something we need to do. And then if so, we make recommendations to the legislature for next year. Yeah, clear as mud. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I should provide a little bit more guidance as chair, but I had the same thought, Representative, that perhaps if it wasn't, maybe a little bit of the opposite of what Representative Fairchild expressed, that if we weren't ready to change the scholarship program right now, we could amend out that language, then keep the task force language intact. And I'm not sure exactly if we would get this above the line anyways or not, but at least it shows we're making an effort. And I think that's good to demonstrate, especially if there's a complaint filed. Certainly don't want there to be any punitive damages that are going to impact the state in any way. I believe Representative Smith had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, would we be pulling the rug out of the people that are on it right now if we did this?
That's a good question. I believe Dr. Flanders left, and so I wish he would have been here I would call him back up to the podium to ask him that. I think the Board of Regents, if I may, I think they would do everything in their power to make sure that nothing was pulled out from underneath them. So perhaps there could be some undersubscribed. I'll finish my comment and welcome you to the podium, but I think there's other undersubscribed scholarship programs. They do have the reappropriation authority to sweep money from one scholarship to the next. And so I think they would make every attempt to make sure those students are made whole until we can figure out how to move forward.
And another comment you made, so many students have worked so hard to take 4 years of math and, you know, the curriculum that they had to have. So if they, like you say, maybe $1,000 isn't much, but if we went $1,500 and gave it to more people, because there's an awful lot of kids that have worked awful hard to take that curriculum, and if we could reward more of them with a little less, that doesn't hurt my feelings at all. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you for that. I believe we have Michelle here representing the Kansas Board of Regents. Dr. Flanders had to step out, but Michelle, thank you for filling in. welcome you to the podium if you'd introduce yourself to the committee.
Sorry about that. Director of Financial Aid at Kansas Board of Regents, Michelle Ariano. So the question was, would students still get the scholarship who are currently in the program if we were to make this change? If we only take out the ethnic part of that scholarship, then yes. If all the other academic pieces stay in place, those students will still continue to receive the award. If we do change it and put more restrictions on that scholarship, whether it be first gen, they already are financially needy students, but some may not also have Pell Grants, then some of those students may not continue. If you could put language in it that grandfathers those students in somehow and keeps them going, then yes, they would continue to get the award.
Thank you, Michelle. Does anybody else have any questions for Michelle? Michelle, thank you for that additional information. That's good to know. So there's been some different ideas how to move forward. It sounds like we could remove the part of the statute in question, or we could not do anything because there's been neutral testimony that suggested maybe it's a little premature because there hasn't been a court ruling that specifically addresses scholarship, and the U.S. Supreme Court ruling only impacts admissions, directly speaks to admissions. And so don't want to get the cart before the horse. I understand that as well, but I also understand the other concern that there's been a complaint filed by the U.S. Department of Education. So there is that concern of, what do we do? Other discussion. Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the complaint being filed, it only makes me think, what else is, going to happen, and how far some of this stuff may go. So how do we take and we write this so that we protect the kids that are already on these scholarships? What kind of language do we have to have there? How do we do the things like the Board of Regents said on grandfathering them, and what kind of language does that take? And then I think that, just thinking out loud here a little bit, as we go through this process, whether we go with a task force or whatever it may be, I think we need to be pretty careful on how we proceed, make sure that we have all bases covered. So if it takes, the interim to be able to do and come up, maybe that's the best way to do it. Don't want to create a whole lot of work for everybody, but I think that may be a smart way of doing it.
Representative Smith.
Just my thoughts. I think at this stage of the game, I think we ought to leave it alone. And next year, early on, talk about it, work on it, go from there. But I think at this stage of the game, it's too late to do a whole lot. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Smith. I do know the priority deadline for the Ethnic Minority Scholarship Program is April 1st. At least that's what I read on the website. Then the final deadline is sometime in May. So, there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and people that are applying for not only financial aid because of the U.S. Department of Education, their rollout of the simplified FAFSA, and that's causing a lot of setbacks for a lot of folks. I don't want to do that here. But I would say, because we have not received any formal acknowledgement that this is in violation, I'm not sure. I think it might be premature if we tried to alter the bill today during this session, kind of at this late hour in session. I don't want to rush it. And I feel like I have assurances from the Kansas Board of Regents that they will continue to award those dollars to those students. And so maybe perhaps an alternate to doing a task force would be just me requesting from the speaker and House leadership that we do an interim committee. And maybe it doesn't have to be so, I guess, formal in the sense that we have to pass a bill to get a task force and all those things. Representative Concanon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I was kind of thinking along the same lines as you. I think it would require too many conceptual amendments to figure this out today. I would be supportive of the task force. I think that we need to be careful enough in what we do with this to just do this with a committee during session. I think that the experts in the field should be at the table, and a task force would provide for that. We could request, or you could request, but we could also put a proviso in the omnibus budget and to schedule. Is this the bill that is in the governor's budget? Okay, sorry, I got the two bills confused here a little bit. Yeah, so the funding is there, and so, yeah, we could do it that way too. So either one, thanks.
I guess I would look to my more experienced members on this committee in terms of, those of you that have served on a task force versus an interim committee, pros and cons. So if you guys have any feedback, I would love to hear it. Representative Woodard.
Mr. Chair, I would say whatever we end up doing, we want to be clear. A few years ago, we did a Future of Higher Education Council, and while it wasn't a super important detail, it came down to, because it was not outlined in the law, creating the task force. There was some discussion about who was supposed to pay legislators and who wasn't. So I just think if it's an interim, we know where the funding's coming from. A task force sometimes gets a little tricky.
Any other comments on that? Representative Sawyer.
I think an interim's fine. That's our more normal process. You don't have to create, right, kind of extra work. And I've been on those task forces too, where sometimes it's not real clear, and they go different directions. Interims just seem more like it's dealt with the legislature. It's the legislative process. More directed towards coming up with a bill, whereas task forces sometimes kind of go off different directions.
Well, I certainly don't want to chair a committee that goes off the rails. So, yeah, so I guess with that feedback, I think I would pass over taking any action on HB 2843 today. I do think it's important that we did have a bill hearing on this topic today, not only for the public record to show that we are concerned about being in compliance and that we want to do our due diligence and make an informed decision because it does impact students. Vice Chair Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with that, but I would also like for Jill to just go ahead and correct the language that she was talking about in her testimony. Would that be appropriate?
I believe that was HB 2464.
Yes.
The first bill. Yeah. So, yeah, I was just suggesting that we kind of pass over HB 2843 and really not act upon that today based off of feedback. But I believe I acknowledged Representative Wassinger's concern about the previous bill. But Representative Wassinger.
No, I just wanted to point out that, the bill would have to be also re-entered in the next biennium because so it will have to be reworked, and I think the interim committee will do the best with that.
On HB 2843? Okay. Are you still wanting to, is the committee wanting to work HB 2464 today? What do you guys think? Representative Woodard?
I'm going to make a motion to suspend the rules if it's the appropriate time.
It's been moved? Well, or is that a question? Oh, I think it's totally appropriate. This could be the last part of our doing business this session. So
I would move to suspend the rules and that we pass out House Bill 2464.
Okay, it's been moved by Representative Woodard that we suspend the rules in order to consider House Bill 2464. It's been seconded by Representative Wassinger. Is there any discussion? Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm fine with going ahead and voting on it, but I'm not a big fan of the bill just because I would rather just allow each individual university to come up with their own scholarships in regards to academics or financial need or athletics or whatever else. I don't really think that we need more state scholarship programs. And kind of like I was pointing out earlier, we still don't really even know what the actual cost of this bill is. We still haven't even been provided with any of that information.
Is there any other discussion about suspending the rules? Again, this will have to receive 2/3 majority in order to suspend the rules and to work this bill. So all in favor of the, well, Representative Woodard, would you like to close on your motion?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I close.
It's been moved and seconded that we suspend the rules for consideration of HB 2464. All in favor say aye. All opposed nay. Motion carries. So what is the will of the committee on HB 2464? Representative Woodard.
Mr. Chair, I move that we pass HB 2464 out favorable.
Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved by Representative Woodard, seconded by Representative Wassinger to to pass out HB 2464 favorably. Now is there discussion? Representative Wassinger. Representative Wassinger defers to Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move to amend the bill with the cleanup language that was proposed by the reviser.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to offer the technical cleanup language offered by as noted by the reviser. That language would include technical colleges. No, I'm sorry. You may, yeah. Please clarify the technical change.
So, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this is the bill that we incorrectly referred to not-for-profit independent institutions. And so I would need to make the change on page 2 in lines 1 through 7 as reflected in Mr. Lindsay's testimony.
Thank you for clarifying that. So is there discussion on the technical cleanup? Seeing none, Representative Woodard, you may close on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I close.
All in favor of the technical cleanup as outlined by the reviser, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Is there anything else for consideration for HB 2464? Seeing none, what is the will of the committee? Representative Woodard.
Mr. Chair, I move that we pass out House Bill 2464 as amended.
Is there a second? It's been moved by Representative Woodard, seconded by Representative Wassinger to pass out favorably HB 2464. Is there discussion? All in favor say aye. All opposed nay. Motion carries. Well, committee, it's been a great session working with each of you. I think you guys have poured your hearts into this committee and your work on other committees as well. Appreciate the time you've given me as chair, and I think there's a lot of good ideas to advance our state in the realm of higher education, but I also think there's good ideas for how we can be more efficient with our state dollars and being mindful that these resources come from our taxpayers. And so we want to make those dollars count, and we want to propel our institutions of higher education in a meaningful way so we can all benefit. Is there any other comments, parting comments or announcements? Yes, Representative Amix. No, that's great. You guys have always kept me on track this session. So Representative Amix noted that we have minutes, meeting minutes. So is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes? Okay. Is there a second? Representative Smith seconds. Is there any discussion, any corrections? Seeing none, you may close. Okay. Representative Amix, it's been moved and seconded to approve the meeting minutes for the 3 meetings outlined. Can you give us those dates again? Okay. All in favor say aye. All opposed nay. Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned.